17,000 precision guidance systems, transferred in silence, not to an ally, to a nation Washington spent 40 years trying to isolate, and the evidence didn't come from intelligence briefings or congressional oversight. It came from a diplomatic cable someone wasn't supposed to see. The fallout isn't theoretical. Every guidance chip Iran now possesses increases the accuracy of missiles that can reach American bases across the Middle East. Your tax dollars fund the defense systems trying to stop them, and the cost of that defense just became mathematically unsustainable because of technology someone decided to hand over in secret. This channel runs on no corporate funding, no government backing, and no advertising pressure telling us what to leave out. If this kind of analysis matters to you, if you want to understand what's actually happening before the sanitized version reaches mainstream outlets, hit subscribe and turn on notifications. The next 15 minutes will show you exactly why this transfer changes the strategic landscape in ways most analysts aren't willing to say out loud. At 2:47 a.m. Eastern Time on March 9th, a set of diplomatic cables appeared on a secure server accessed by fewer than 300 people globally. The cables detailed a technology transfer agreement finalized 8 months earlier. The sender, a defense ministry official in a nation that publicly proclaims neutrality. The recipient, Iranian defense procurement officers operating through shell companies in Malaysia and the United Arab Emirates. The cargo, 17,000 inertial measurement units, the core component that allows a ballistic missile to hit within 3 meters of its intended target instead of 300. The official statement, released 6 hours after the leak went public, described the transaction as agricultural equipment and dismissed the cables as fabricated propaganda. The problem with that explanation becomes clear when you examine the technical specifications listed in the transfer documents. Agricultural equipment doesn't require ring laser gyroscopes accurate to 0.001 degrees per hour. It doesn't need accelerometers calibrated to detect gravitational variations at 40,000 feet. And it certainly doesn't get shipped in electromagnetic shielding containers designed to prevent detection by orbital reconnaissance satellites. Here's what the Pentagon is not saying. Every modern precision-guided weapon depends on knowing exactly where it is and exactly where it's going. GPS can be jammed, satellite links can be disrupted, but an inertial measurement unit is self-contained. It measures acceleration and rotation independent of any external signal. Once a missile launches, these systems guide it to the target even if every satellite in orbit goes dark and every communication channel gets severed. They are the difference between a weapon that destroys a military installation and one that levels a city block, hoping the target is somewhere inside the rubble. Iran's missile program has been advancing for 3 decades. What it lacked wasn't propulsion or explosive payloads. It lacked precision. A Shahab-3 ballistic missile could reach Tel Aviv, but hitting a specific building required launching dozens and accepting that most would miss. The circular error probable, the radius within which half the missiles will land, was 800 meters. 17,000 guidance systems changes that math completely. With modern inertial navigation, that error drops to under 5 meters. One missile, one target, near certainty of impact. Now here's the part Western defense analysts are discussing in closed briefings, but not in public statements. The nation that transferred this technology is a member of the Nuclear Suppliers Group, an organization explicitly designed to prevent the spread of weapons-grade materials and dual-use technologies to states pursuing nuclear ambitions. Membership requires adherence to export controls. Violating those controls carries consequences ranging from diplomatic isolation to economic sanctions. Yet the transfer happened. It was authorized at levels high enough that 16 separate officials signed approval documents. This wasn't rogue elements. This was policy. Professor Mohammad Marandi, an Iranian analyst based in Tehran, stated on March 12th that this technology had been in Iranian possession for over a year. He described it as a game changer for strategic deterrence. What he didn't say, but what the operational data shows, is that Iran has already integrated these systems into its newest generation of missiles. The Khaybar-Shikan, unveiled in February, demonstrated precision strikes during tests that Iranian media broadcast widely. The strikes hit decommissioned tanks positioned in the desert. Every single missile landed within the target zone. The cameras captured impacts. They did not capture misses because there were no misses. The official narrative from the transferring nation describes this as a regrettable administrative error, a failure of export licensing procedures that has since been corrected. That explanation requires believing that 17,000 units of highly controlled military technology passed through multiple inspection points, crossed international borders, cleared customs in 3 separate jurisdictions, and reached their final destination in Iran without a single checkpoint raising a red flag. It requires believing the oversight failure was so comprehensive that not one of the 16 approving officials questioned why agricultural equipment needed specifications designed for ballistic reentry vehicles. The debris field of that explanation doesn't hold together under examination, but the implications of the truth are uncomfortable enough that no Western government wants to pursue them publicly. Let me show you what the numbers actually say. Each inertial measurement unit costs approximately $42,000 to manufacture when produced at scale. 17,000 units represent $714 million in direct hardware value, but the strategic value is exponentially higher. The United States operates 11 military installations within range of Iranian missiles. Each installation houses between 800 and 4,000 personnel. Defending those installations against precision strikes requires layered missile defense systems. A single THAAD battery costs $1.2 billion. Patriot systems add another $300 million per battery, and those systems depend on intercepting missiles whose flight paths can be predicted. Precision guidance breaks that equation. If Iran can reliably hit specific buildings within a base, the defensive calculation changes. You're not protecting an area, you're protecting individual structures. The number of interceptors required multiplies. The cost multiplies. The mathematical burden shifts entirely to the defender. Iran launches one missile costing $800,000. The United States fires 3 interceptors at $4 million each to ensure a kill. $12 million to stop 800,000. And Iran now has the capacity to build precision missiles faster than the United States can produce interceptors. The production rate for THAAD interceptors, 6 per month. The estimated production rate for Iranian precision ballistic missiles with the new guidance systems, 40 per month. 40 versus 6, read that again slowly. The defender cannot win this math, not over months, not over years, not unless the entire defense posture shifts from interception to preemption. And preemption means strikes inside Iran, which means open warfare, which means consequences nobody in Washington is ready to accept. Every interceptor fired is a cost the American taxpayer absorbs. Every missile Iran builds is a cost spread across an economy already functioning under sanctions. The asymmetry favors the attacker. It always has. But precision guidance makes that asymmetry brutal. Here's the dimension almost nobody is discussing openly. This technology transfer did not happen in isolation. It happened within a broader pattern of realignment. The nation that provided these systems has been quietly expanding economic ties with Iran despite sanctions. Trade volume increased 43% over the past 18 months. Diplomatic exchanges that were non-existent 5 years ago now occur quarterly. And defense cooperation agreements, previously unthinkable, are now documented in ministerial meeting summaries. China is watching this closely. Beijing has spent 2 decades developing its own precision missile capabilities designed to deny American carrier operations in the Western Pacific. The strategy is called anti-access area denial. It relies on overwhelming numbers of precision-guided missiles that can target ships, aircraft, and bases faster than defenses can respond. What happened in the Middle East is a smaller-scale version of the same doctrine. Iran just became a proof of concept for a strategy China has invested billions developing. And the proof works. Russia benefits passively. Every hour of American strategic focus consumed by Iranian missile threats is an hour of reduced attention on Ukraine, on NATO's eastern flank, on Arctic militarization. Moscow doesn't need to act. It just needs to watch as adversaries multiply and American resources stretch thinner. The transfer of guidance technology to Iran didn't require Russian involvement, but it serves Russian interests perfectly. A United States forced to maintain defensive postures across multiple theaters simultaneously is a United States with fewer options when Moscow decides to test boundaries. The global south is drawing conclusions. A mid-sized power invested in self-reliance just demonstrated the ability to challenge American military supremacy in its own region using technology acquired through partnerships Washington cannot fully control. That sends a message to every nation watching. Alignment with the United States is optional and alternatives exist. The unipolar moment, if it ever truly existed, is closing. The evidence is in the guidance systems now integrated into Iranian missiles. Now pull back to the strategic level. Why would any nation risk international backlash to arm Iran with precision missile technology? The leaked cables suggest the answer isn't ideological. It's transactional. Iran controls the Strait of Hormuz. 20% of global oil supply transits that waterway. The nation that transferred the technology imports 73% of its crude oil. If the strait closes, prices spike. If prices spike, economies stall. But if Iran views that nation as a strategic partner rather than an adversary, the calculus of closure changes. The guidance systems weren't just a military transfer. They were an insurance policy against energy disruption. That insurance comes with a price. The technology Iran now possesses doesn't just threaten American bases. It threatens Israeli infrastructure, Saudi oil facilities, Emirati ports. Every regional power now faces a threat environment that shifted overnight. And the nation that enabled that shift cannot publicly acknowledge what it did without triggering consequences it's not prepared to face. So the official story remains agricultural equipment. The diplomatic cables remain disputed, and the missiles keep getting more accurate. The evidence that forced this into the open didn't come from investigative journalism or whistleblowers. It came from a leak. Someone inside the system with access to classified diplomatic traffic decided the public needed to know. That decision carries risks. Governments don't appreciate exposure of secret agreements. Intelligence services don't forgive breaches. Whoever released those cables understood the cost and did it anyway. That suggests the information was considered important enough to justify the personal and professional consequences. Western media coverage of the leak has been minimal. 3 major outlets reported it. 2 framed it as unverified claims. 1 buried it in the international news section. None pursued follow-up investigations. The silence is revealing. Either the story lacks substantiation, or the implications are uncomfortable enough that detailed scrutiny serves no institutional interest. The evidence points toward the latter. The cables are real. The transfer happened. The technology is operational. But acknowledging that reality forces questions about alliance structures, export controls, and the effectiveness of non-proliferation regimes that powerful interests would prefer remain unasked. Professor Marandi's public confirmation added a layer of credibility Western sources couldn't easily dismiss. He has no incentive to fabricate Iranian capabilities. If anything, operational security would suggest keeping advancements quiet until they're needed. His willingness to discuss the transfer openly implies Iran views the strategic benefit of disclosure as outweighing the tactical advantage of surprise. The message is clear: we have this capability now, and we're not hiding it. Draw your own conclusions about what that means for your military planning. The timeline matters. The transfer occurred 8 months before the leak. That's 8 months of integration, testing, and operational deployment. Iranian missile forces didn't just receive the technology. They've had time to incorporate it into existing systems, train personnel, and conduct live fire validation. The tests Professor Marandi referenced weren't demonstrations. They were confirmations. The precision strikes shown on Iranian media weren't propaganda. They were proof. Every adversary watching this just received confirmation that American dominance in precision warfare is no longer exclusive. The technological gap that defined military superiority for 3 decades is narrowing. And it's narrowing not because adversaries developed equivalent systems independently, but because nations that possess the technology decided sharing it serves their interest better than restricting it. The economic dimension extends beyond oil. Iran has been effectively locked out of the dollar-based financial system for years. Sanctions have forced the development of alternative payment mechanisms. The nation that transferred the guidance systems now conducts 70% of its bilateral trade with Iran in currencies other than the dollar. That's not just sanctions evasion. That's the construction of a parallel economic architecture that reduces dollar dependence. Every transaction that bypasses SWIFT is a transaction that weakens the leverage sanctions are supposed to create. And every nation observing this dynamic sees proof that alternatives to Western financial infrastructure are viable. The defense implications are immediate. The economic implications are generational. What happened with these guidance systems is not an isolated incident. It's a data point in a larger trend. Technology transfers that were unthinkable a decade ago are now negotiable. Alliances that were considered permanent are now transactional. And strategic assumptions that guided American foreign policy for half a century are being tested in real time. Here's what changes from this point forward. The United States can no longer assume that export controls will prevent adversaries from acquiring sensitive military technologies. The mechanisms that enforce those controls depended on a level of international cooperation that no longer exists at previous levels. Nations are making independent calculations about their strategic interests, and those calculations increasingly diverge from American preferences. The result is a proliferation landscape where dual-use technologies move more freely and the recipients are less predictable. Israel now faces a threat environment fundamentally different from what existed 18 months ago. Precision Iranian missiles can target specific buildings, specific runways, specific defense installations. Iron Dome was designed to intercept rockets with large circular error probabilities. Its effectiveness drops significantly when defending against precision strikes. The number of interceptors required increases, the cost increases, and the strategic equation that has defined Israeli security planning for 2 decades gets rewritten. Saudi Arabia watches this development with acute awareness. The Abqaiq oil facility, critical to Saudi production capacity, is within range of Iranian missiles. Previous attacks used drones and cruise missiles. Future attacks could use precision ballistic missiles that are harder to intercept and more likely to cause catastrophic damage. The vulnerability creates pressure for either rapprochement with Iran or accelerated acquisition of advanced defensive systems. Either path represents a shift in regional power dynamics. The UAE operates ports that handle significant global trade volume. Precision strikes against those ports would disrupt supply chains far beyond the Middle East. The threat creates leverage Iran didn't previously possess, and that leverage exists because someone decided transferring guidance technology served their interest despite the broader implications. What burned tonight is not infrastructure. It's the assumption that Western origin military technology would remain exclusive to Western aligned nations. That assumption is gone. The leaked cables made it impossible to maintain, and every calculation about deterrence, defense, and strategic stability now has to account for a world where precision strike capabilities proliferate faster than the systems designed to counter them. Here are my 3 predictions with timelines attached. First, within 6 months, Iran publicly demonstrates a precision strike capability against a maritime target in the Persian Gulf, proving the technology works in contested environments and sending an unmistakable message about Strait of Hormuz vulnerabilities. Second, within 1 year, at least 2 additional nations acquire similar guidance systems through the same channels, expanding the proliferation network beyond Iran and creating a regional arms race in precision strike capabilities. Third, within 18 months, the United States announces a major revision to missile defense posture in the Middle East, acknowledging implicitly that the previous strategy is no longer viable against precision threats. Drop your prediction in the comments. Which happens first, Iran's public demonstration, the next nation acquiring the technology, or the Pentagon's strategy revision? Tell me, because I read every single one. If this gave you something mainstream coverage didn't, a framework for understanding why this technology transfer matters more than headlines suggest, share it with one person who needs to see what's actually happening beneath the diplomatic language. The next video goes somewhere even this one didn't reach. The financial architecture being built to replace dollar dominance. The mechanism's already operational. The timeline shorter than anyone publicly admits. Subscribe so you're there when it lands.